also want to do Joshua Tree.
Oh, that's absolutely on my list.
Yeah, I haven't done that.
Be a good winter thing to do, I think. I think it's
Okay,
hot wherever that is.
probably.
Southern California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my curiosity, Ryan. You've talked a lot about this, and so I'm interested in what you might share. As credit unions, we talk all the time about financial well-being. It's a really important part of what we bring to life. And you have some interesting theories grounded in research about how important it is early stage in your career to leverage an employment relationship to have a stronger financial future. It's a mouthful.
Absolutely. That's a lot. Yeah, that's a big topic. And I certainly would not consider myself an expert on this. Anything that I've picked up has really been from really smart people, like Taylor Nelms from Feline kind of published an article years ago that kind of shifted my thought on this. And, I think there's a lot of amazing things that we as credit unions can do to help educate and help people really understand all of the things in terms of products and uh, debt and credit score. And certainly, if you're working serving a member or serving someone who's serving a member, understanding all of these things is it's 101. You have to understand the business and you have to understand the products that we offer and how those products can help our members truly have a better financial life. My you know what's kind of shaped me is like we can do all of those things and we can educate people on how to make good decisions, but at the end of the day, we should really be thinking about how we can grow the part of the balance sheet that's the income part of the balance sheet, and doing that in a way that still is fulfilling and makes us happy, but also being really purposeful about the kinds of experiences that are going to help us grow in our careers and make more money. And I think it's good for companies to talk about it. And I think it's good for employees to talk about the fact that, as we grow in our career, we make more money. And so we can take care of our goals and take care of our families and create a better life for ourselves, because financial wellness doesn't happen if you don't have enough money, period. And you can be brilliant in terms of all the products and services. And there are many people that are very brilliant, but they may not, if you're not bringing in the cash flow, then, it's going to be really, really challenging for yourself. And so I think about like the need to bring in stretch assignments and projects and experiences in order to really continue to grow. Obviously, do your job and do it well, but adding to that, what are the things that you can continue to do to increase your marketability as a employee?
One of the things that's really interesting about what you're saying is there's an ownership for an individual to take. I'm guessing you're not saying you should march in after you've started a new job 2 weeks later and say you should make more money.
No, I think that it's critical to demonstrate that you don't do that. I think there is a time and place to advocate for more money, but I believe it's after you've established that you can add value and have an impact in the organization. And frankly, like so much of that, of course, depends on the organization and the leader you're working for. But I believe that you have to go in, establish yourself, be the best at whatever it is that job is, and have your head down and really focus on that. But in the peripheral, it's important to build relationships, because that the old cliche is like it's all about kind of who you know when you're searching for a job, and also you have to be really careful early in the job or in your career to make it seem all about you. If you really focus on having an impact and doing great work, I believe the other stuff kind of comes. Again, there are caveats to that, in times where maybe if you are working for leadership or a company that's not in a place to really recognize your value, I would have some different advice. But I think you work really hard, you put your head down, you be the absolute best version of whatever that is. Don't be afraid. I've worked with some brilliant people in my career that worked themselves out of jobs, and you know, we were in a position, and I'm still thankful to be in a position to be able to find other things for that type of talent to do. And I think that's the world we're in terms of automation and identifying, coming in and identifying things that are kind of broken, fixing them, and then kind of moving to the next can only be helpful in terms of the career. But yeah, there's a time and place for the money conversation. And it's not your first month or 6 months.
No. Well, you talk a little bit about how you look around for places you can plug into. If somebody's earlier stage in their career, maybe they've been in the job for a year or two, they understand what it is that they're doing. How do you know the places where you should be picking up a little extra, or how do you ask about that? What are the best ways to identify those moments?
Yeah, I think coming from a place of wanting to help and help your boss, frankly, like if you identify things that they are if it feels like they're overwhelmed, or if it's something that could be both a stretch project but also or task, but also something that you feel like you could execute and do well on. um, I also would advocate for involvement outside of your own department and opportunities to kind of collaborate. There are companies, and again, I'm thankful to have had support at our company here, Canvas, where we were able to do clubs and what we call connection groups or employee resource groups. If you all don't, if you're at a company that doesn't have one of those, advocate for starting one of those. I mean, we recently had a couple folks raise their hand to start an emerging professional group here at Canvas, and it's taken off like a rocket, and it's been a really fulfilling group for those involved. And I think don't be afraid to ask how you can contribute in a different way. Especially if you kind of hit a place in your current role where you've had that candid conversation with your boss, like, hey, I want to continue to, like, how can I continue to grow? I like what you said earlier. I mean, I think you have to take ownership and drive those conversations.
Mhm.
So I believe that there's a ton of value in the structure of one-on-ones and performance reviews and all of that. If you are not already in a place where they have an employee driven model in terms of what one-on-ones or reviews or check-ins might look like, advocate for that in your time. Put time on your boss's calendar to sit down with them and talk about your work, ask for feedback, and ask for things that you can take on that are in service to a goal of yours.
Hmm. I like that. One of the things that we're doing at Community Financial that ties to this is we call it a side hustling grind. And it came from our team. They were talking about the idea of two things coming together. One is team members wanting to earn more money. And secondly, some teams having a lot of work to be done. And the idea is people can raise their hand when there's a need and try something else that might not be in their functional area and earn a little bit more money. And it's been super well received. And I love that it came from our team members identifying those two needs and bringing them together.
How do that sounds amazing. How do your departments who have extra needs kind of advertise or communicate what their needs are?
Well, as an HR professional, you will appreciate we post those. So
Really?
yeah, absolutely.
That's
So
so cool.
yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to make sure that it was being done right and well, and everybody had an opportunity. And so we post them like we would post any other position. People can raise their hands to do it, and that's how it works.
Wow.
Mhm.
Man, we'll have to check in a month when our team steals that idea.
Yes, please do. Yeah, we love
That's
it.
really
It's
cool.
really great. Yeah, it's super fun.
I love that.
Yeah. All right. One of the things I'm curious about, Ryan, is how you think about tenure in a role. There
Mm,
used to be a thing where you would stay in a job for 50 or 60 years. Interestingly, when I interviewed for this job, one of the questions that I got was why my tenure in places was so short. And generally, I've stayed in jobs for 6 to 9 years. And I think that's pretty long by today's standards. Talk a little bit about how much you think tenure matters as people are thinking about their early stage growth.
that's interesting. I love the question because it's actually something I'm thinking about for my on my own career.
Mhm.
So I joined public service, which is Canvas, in 2016 in September. So
Wow.
um, I know. Um, so yeah, that's a while. It's the longest I've been in a job. My prior one was 3 years, and the one before that was I want to say around five.
Mhm.
So I think it depends. If you are in a job that is stagnant and you're kind of doing the same thing and you're not learning new things and getting new experience, I would think pretty seriously after 3 to 4 years of mastery. That's the other part. Like if you feel like you're like the best at that, and other people tell you that, it's not just your own opinion of that. Uh, uh, like performance reviews or whatever. Not that those are always accurate, but then I would say you could be stifling your own career at a certain point, and understanding where within that company and that there are opportunities to grow. And if not, I would make it a part time, a side hustle to find another hustle because I think there's this risk of stagnation if you're staying kind of in the same exact job, doing the same type of work. Now, have been really fortunate where I was part of a company that went through a rebrand. Unfortunate to be part of all of the other companies that went through a pandemic, but that was a kind of, in a weird way, a big learning experience for me and a lot of our team. And we still continue to grow as an organization during that period of time. We did a merger with another credit union, and we've had a lot of really cool, innovative projects that we've been able to work on. And if there was a time here where that slowed down and there wasn't a lot kind of going on, I would start to get the itch to look outside of Canvas and look at other places to go. But thankfully that hasn't happened. I think we're going to continue to drive and change. Um, as a person who's done a lot of hiring, I started my career as a recruiter in the tech sector, and then a corporate recruiter, kind of in the healthcare tech sector, and then now here at the credit union. I'm less concerned about that on people's resumes in terms of having like, if you see a resume where they're jumping every 3 to 5 years, that feels fine. If you see one where it's maybe, a 6 month stint, a 12 month stint, a 6 month stint, a 12, if it's shorter like that, I would just say curiosity. It wouldn't be a deal breaker for me, but I would really want to understand, um, you know, what's happening. If you operate as I do under the assumption that we're not really productive in some of these more, well, in a lot of roles, even our frontline roles are very complicated. You're not productive until you're there for 6 months. You're not really, really productive and probably exceptional at your job until you've been there for at least a year and a half. And so my perspective on that is, if that's the case, then there's this curve at which you want to be giving value to your employer and show a little bit of grit in that.
I'm also curious what you think about having to go to another organization in order to get a raise.
Oh, well, the data's pretty clear that often that is the case when we move from one job to another, we get a pay increase. I would also advise that you look at the whole picture because you are likely starting all over again on 401k. You may also have other benefits that you're leaving behind. And so, really spend the time with some kind of cool AI tool or Excel to break down the true value of your current employment. Um, I also would I want to be really cautious about this one though, because it's hard out there. It's expensive and it keeps getting more expensive. And I do not fault people who move for more money. I would just say, I've seen it so many times, not just here, but in other companies where if somebody puts in a few years, you start to see that career progression within the organization. And, if it's an organization where you kind of look around and you see people who started as serving on the front line and now are directors or AVPs, you might want to think twice about that, understanding kind of that there is that potential for you to grow into that role. Um, so just really, really calculate the value of your total rewards currently, what their potential offer looks like, and so the other question would be, you know, and I'd love your take on this, Tansley. At what point is it okay to go to your boss and say, "Hey, listen, like I feel like am worth more. Um, I've done some research. Is that something you would ever advise of somebody?"
I think so. I really take a lot of the things that you've said about the timing of that seriously and, you know, making sure that you really do understand the value that you're bringing. I think what you've encouraged people to consider is that the input about your value is not only your own. And so if you have been getting really consistent, exceptional reviews, you can see demonstrably that you are contributing significantly to the organization. You can show that. And you've done some good research. And to your point, that's very, very reasonable. And quite frankly, in many organizations, we're getting much more transparent about compensation. And so you should have that information. And it's, I think, readily available in a lot of instances. Being able to talk about that, I think, is important. Now,
Mhm.
how often you do that, how persistent you are in that, understanding the economics of the organization. One of the things that we talk a lot about at Community Financial that I think is important for anybody is, how do you understand the organization's financial health and, where the organization is at in terms of their progress and timing your conversation around that in coordination with your own needs. I often talk about this idea, and I know you've heard me say this a lot of times. Every human relationship, including employer and employee, is a 50-50 balance. Now, not all of us come to it every day at 50-50. And understanding that balance is really important. And if that's off kilter, that's a very bad time to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's hard. I would typically advise it to exercise a lot of patience around that too,
Mhm.
and I've seen that more often than not pay off. And you know, we're one organization where I've seen that happen a lot. I've certainly had a lot of conversations and nerded out to how other companies operate. So I don't think we're that unique in rewarding the the right combination of like passion, service for others, um, just grit, hard work, putting your head down, and being that person who can be a problem solver and problem identifier and problem solver. That to me is so powerful, and you know, I feel like that's a pretty universal um, way for success. And if you find yourself doing that for a couple years and now you're turning grumpy because you don't feel like your organization is recognizing you, then yeah, it's time to get the resume ready and put yourself out there to have some conversations and network and interview, and then you can understand a little bit more about what your market value is.
Brian, one of the things that I did throughout my career, and I'm curious how smart you think it is I was really willing and did multiple times, most organizations I worked at, to take on additional responsibility absent additional compensation.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
I think it's smart. I mean, you're a CEO now, so mic drop.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm
So
not sure that's a direct line.
I want to be, no, it's not. I want to be really careful. I mean, it goes back to that, like, okay, so let's say maybe your current company isn't the place where you want to be. Having some more notches on your belt is really powerful. And that will be a differentiator for you in your next move, whether it's internal or external. I firmly believe that. It's also fun to do different stuff. And it really, for me, is it can really help you look at your other parts of your job that you've been doing through a different lens. And all too often I'll see young professionals look at the value of their work through just their current thing, and it's almost like, and I'm sure you've seen this too, but it's kind of like, oh, this is the thing I do that adds value, and sometimes I see that as a really big mistake, like almost holding on to that thing. And I said it earlier when I talked about kind of working yourself out of a role and, not being afraid of that. I think you can be tactful in terms of how can I make what I'm doing now way more efficient so I can create more space in my life to do some of these other things. And I have to believe there are tons of those types of opportunities in everybody's job.
Agree. Well, and I also think, and you talked a little bit about this, Ryan, that what I really appreciate in people that will pick those additional items up is when they've identified them, because that is a signal to me of a couple of things. One, curiosity, which I think is one of the most important things an individual can bring to an organization today. Subject matter expertise dies. Curiosity is something that fuels your career forward. Also, that you are observing the business in a way that is beyond your day-to-day function. And that tells me that somebody's a bit more invested in the organization, which is also a really important signal to the employer.
Completely agree. And I love shaping curiosity as such a critical skill or, you know, a place to kind of live. One of the like inflection points for me in my career was going to CUNA management school and being told I have to go around and interview and learn more about the business. And in turn, so it's like a forced curiosity, but it made me more curious.
Yeah.
And it made me really appreciate the work that people do across the organization. It helped me build relationships in a different way. If you're not in a place where you're not forced to do that, I would suspect that most organizations and leadership are open to you saying, hey, like I'm in this, lending operations role, or I'm in this role in marketing, or I'm in this role in HR, or whatever that in IT. And I'd love to spend 30 minutes with you, just understanding what you do and what your background was. People love to talk about themselves. And so I think one of the easiest ways to grow and develop in your career is just to ask questions to the people that are around you that you don't normally have the opportunity to work with. And especially in credit unions, you've got people that have been in, you know, leadership, sometimes at the same credit union for 20 years. And I promise you, it's rare that somebody comes along and sits down and asks them questions about their job and their background, how they got to where they are, what their department is looking at, what are the things that they're concerned about and want to improve in, and maybe how your job can help in that. You will blow people's minds if you do that. I promise.
Love that. Well, as we wrap up this episode, Ryan, I think what I'm hearing you say, and I'm curious what you would leave people with, is a path to a sound financial future is not only about instruments of a financial institution, it is about how you build your career and navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet.
Make more money, but not at the expense of happiness.
Yeah.